Oh, it's Wednesday. And you know what that means on Midas Touch? It means Legal AF midweek. By the time we get to midweek now with Karen Friedman, Agnifilo, and Michael Popok, I'm like half exhausted by what's going on in the courts. But we bring the energy, we bring the vigor, we bring the insightfulness. Hold truth to power at one place I know of on the dial. It's called Legal AF. And if you didn't know why we called it that 5.5 years ago, now you know why. So let's kick it off with really a bombshell. We say that a lot sometimes. People sometimes criticize our thumbnails. Everything's a bombshell. Everything's breaking. Well, it is. And in this case, we've got a judge, Judge Cooper in the District of Columbia, for the first time. It's hard to believe it's the first time, but we're only 60 days into the administration, so everything sort of kind of a first time, declaring that DOGE and Elon Musk are subject to public records law, which we call FOIA, Freedom of Information Act, which is a big deal because they've been trying to hide in a surreptitious fashion everything that DOGE is all about, behind the cover of night, behind executive privilege, using velocity and opaqueness to try to cut the government down to size without congressional oversight or public accountability. And Chris Cooper, the judge, has had enough. And he's ruled for the first time that DOGE service and Musk must disclose in public records everything about their existence and operations, period. And we'll talk more about that. It's a great case brought by Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, Crew. And then we'll turn to another landmark bombshell. The First Circuit Court of Appeals in Boston, Massachusetts, joining with two other circuits to declare that Donald Trump's efforts to use an executive order to rip the beating heart of birthright citizenship out of our Constitution is unconstitutional. And they will, for now, not agree with the Trump administration. They will not block the nationwide injunction put in place by Judge Sorokin up in Boston, Massachusetts. They will join with the Ninth Circuit and the Fourth Circuit and this is not on the merits of the appeal, but it sort of is. And we'll tell you the difference between that and how this will now set up a pretty rapid appeal to the United States Supreme Court as we battle this out. And Karen and I will give our best analysis and estimate about what will happen next in that particular case. I talked a lot about in a recent hot take about the smallest of agencies. I said the smallest will lead us. But there is a case about the African development entity set up by Congress to invest in Africa and in that continent that had been completely eviscerated and shut down, even worse than U.S. aid, overnight by Donald Trump trying to put in one of his lackeys, Mr. Morocco, to head that organization. And the board and its executive chairman fought back. And they pulled the judge, Judge Leon, a senior judge. And he put an administrative stay in place, but now he's lifted the stay, but with some words to the Trump administration. Are they falling on deaf ears? Does it matter? What does it all mean about Donald Trump's takeover in broad daylight of agencies and the cutting the legs out from under congressional funding and mandates before our very eyes? And then we'll end today with a very interesting and kind of sets our teeth on edge a little bit in many, many ways. The case of Mahmoud Khalil. It was a green card holding graduate student at Columbia University. I almost demonstrated I don't live near New York any longer and misnamed the university, who led the pro-Palestinian movement on the campus, one of the leaders there, one of the leaders of Divest, trying to force schools like Columbia to divest in protest of Israel's policies. I don't necessarily agree with his what he's saying under the First Amendment, but I will defend till the very end his right to say it. And as a green card holder, not to have ICE burst through his door in front of his 8-month pregnant wife, who's a U.S. citizen, and whisk him off to Louisiana in 24 hours in order to avoid the jurisdiction of a New York judge. That New York judge, who we're going to talk about, held a hearing recently, a series of hearings about this and about the ability of Donald Trump on the fly to use ICE as judge, jury, and executioner to revoke people's green carded, other legal documented status because they don't like what they're saying. And we'll break it all down right here. The only place I know on the dial that does it. Legal AF. Karen, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Popok? I'm so happy. It's Wednesday.
I know. That used to be Hump Day, remember? And now it's Legal AF Day.
I know. Oh, I have to fix my. There we go. I have to match you there. That's much better.
Are you matching my head?
I'm matching your headspace. But yeah, I used to. Wednesdays were always like, oh, it's the middle of the week, whatever. But now I wake up every Wednesday. I'm so excited that it's Legal AF Day, and I get to have a break from the legal work that I do the rest of the week. So I'm so excited to see you.
The drudgery of representing actual clients. Yeah, I get it. I get it. People know that I kind of moved out of that world come the election. I have some clients. I don't want to undermine them. I do have some remaining clients, but my day-to-day practice is really here on the Midas Touch Network and on Legal AF. Before we jump in, I know, Karen, you and I talked about it before. We just rolled the odometer on the Legal AF channel. We just went over today 500. There it is. 500,000 subscribers in less than 6 months. I couldn't ask for better. It reinforces my pep in my step every morning when I go to the Legal AF channel to curate it, to develop content. I know when you're not busy doing law work, you're over there with us as well. And just a shout out to those that have helped contribute besides our audience, without which we would not be in existence. But we've got Court Accountability Action, Lisa Graves, Alex Aronson, and Mike Sachs. We've got Dina Dahl. We've got Shan Wu. We've got me. We've got you when you can do it. Just an amazing group of people every hour doing something at the intersection of law and politics. Thank you to our audience. Check us out. Legal AF MTN from Midas Touch Network on that. Let's people come here for the ads. And they stay for the analysis. Let's get to the analysis and talk about this. Really, I mean, we're running out of adjectives to use for certain developments in the Trump administration, but this really is a landmark. As I joked on a recent hot take about it, it's like the piñata of DOGE and Musk is about to break open, and this is a big hit on the piñata. Cooper, a very good judge in District of Columbia, took one look in 37 pages at all the record that had been developed about the velocity at which DOGE has been operating, which is part of its power, its superpower, and the opaqueness and the surreptitiousness of its conduct, and said, yeah. And the way it's exercising executive power in a way that a quote unquote, as Donald Trump likes to call it, or his administration, and a simple advisor to Donald Trump doesn't really do. And to call him an advisor is an insult to our intelligence and an insult to the court. And the judge said, because the issue was whether they are subject to public records law because they're an agency. If they're not an agency and they're merely some sort of advisor to the president, then we got the whole executive privilege problem about what they are, whether they can testify or provide documents at all. So Crew sued DOGE Services and others and demanded 2 sets of FOIA, Freedom of Information Act requests, one against the Office of Management and Budget, because that's where all the bodies are buried too, about funding cuts and staff cuts and all of that, and the other directly against DOGE Service. And the Trump administration fought back, right? And I'll let you take it from there about executive privilege and the fight back by the administration, Karen.
Yeah, so look, what's happening here is DOGE wants to be able to have complete control over the executive branch and all of the agencies. And so in order to do that, so that they can crash and burn our economy and dismantle our government and take money away from people who need it, and Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and everything else. I mean, they're literally trying to dismantle the United States government. And in order to do that, they have to have certain authority or certain power. And so to do that, they force their way into a different agency that already existed within the executive branch. And it was like an IT agency. I can't remember what it was called. So that's how they gained access to these agencies. The problem is, if they are an agency, if that is actually what they are, then, as you said, Popok, that subjects them to certain rules, laws, requirements, etc. One of them is that the head of DOGE has to be appointed by the president with the advice and consent of the Senate, which has not happened, right? And so they keep saying, oh, he's just an advisor. Oh, it's not an agency. It's like they're gaslighting the American people and everybody who actually sees what it is. Of course, Elon Musk is the head of it. And of course, it's an agency. And they literally try to say, oh, no, nothing to see here. But what we're seeing and what happened in this case with Judge Cooper is he basically said, no, that is not the case here. That is not what's happening. This is an agency, and therefore you are subject to the laws of this land. Now, what is FOIA? It stands for the Freedom of Information Act. It's something that is extremely important in government agencies. There's something called FOIL in New York State, the Freedom of Information Law. That's what applied to me when I worked for a state government agency, the Manhattan DA's office, for my entire career. We had a whole unit set up, a whole group of people whose job was nothing more than to respond to these FOIA or FOIL requests, because any single person, doesn't matter who you are, can submit a FOIL request to a government entity and ask for certain records. The New York City Police Department, same thing. I bet they have over 100 people who do nothing but respond to FOIA requests. And why is that? It's because you don't automatically get whatever you ask for. You get certain things, and of course, certain sensitive things you can't get, or certain things have to be redacted. But someone has to go through and apply the law that says these are the things you have to give over and these are the things you don't. And so it's a really important part of keeping the lights on and the transparency in the government. It gives the American people the ability to see what's going on in your government, because transparency is key, obviously. And here we have a federal judge, as you said, who basically said that, look, you're working in secret, you're working really fast, and it's the very thing that makes you subject to FOIA, right? That you are acting like an agency. You have the power, you have the authority. And so you're the very entity. I don't care what you call it. I don't care what you say it is. I don't care what you are going to label certain things. You're acting like something that is considered an agency. And therefore, you are subject to things like congressional oversight. Congress can pass a law like the Freedom of Information Act, and you're subject to it. And so the judge said basically that you're subject to the public records law. You must, but he also knows this is going to be appealed, right? So knowing that, what he said was, look, you must preserve everything while you do your appeals, so that it doesn't get, it's called spoliation, right? It doesn't get destroyed, which you could imagine that happening, right? To try to avoid it. A government agency could do that. And so he said, no, you must keep it. You must, and he ordered them to keep it while you are appealing it, if you choose to appeal it. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say you have to give a rolling production, meaning what's being asked for is so voluminous, and I realize you have to go through it all and redact the things that you can't have, et cetera. So what I'm going to do is, rather than wait until the end, you're going to have to do it on a rolling basis. So as you go through documents and as you find them and you take out whatever it is that you're going to take out, the sensitive information, you have to give it over on a rolling production basis. So it's a pretty big deal. And I think it's great. It's a great ruling that essentially is telling Elon Musk and DOGE, we see what you are, and you're subject to the same laws that everyone else is. And thank God for Crew, who's doing this. So it's pretty great. Judge Cooper didn't buy this whole, Musk is just an advisor kind of thing. And, he basically said, look, you're in a decision-making authority, and you're making cuts across the government, and that makes you subject to this. So I think it's great. I'm not holding my breath that we're going to see anything soon. But it's just to add one more thing, FOIA, the Freedom of Information Act, is codified, if anyone wants to read it, in Title V of the U.S. Code, Section 552, and it grants individuals the right to request access to records from federal agencies. So yeah, it's a pretty big deal, and judges are finally starting to call out Musk and DOGE for what it is, and I think that's a positive sign.
Yeah, I mean, look, Judge Cooper did an amazing job in his analysis And everything that the Trump administration pushed as the reason or rationale for not complying with FOIA was actually used, was like hoisting them on their own petard, using it against them. The velocity and opaqueness by which they are operating, which was obviously by design, in order to catch Congress and the public by surprise, and to lay waste to the federal government and funding before anybody could figure out what had happened, is the very reason it demonstrates an exercise of executive power that's independent from Donald Trump. Donald Trump saying to the cabinet, come on, it's not must. You got to run your own cabinet. Again, reinforces, along with his joint session speech and confession there, that Musk is exercising independent authority behind closed doors in the dark, surreptitiously, so surreptitious that the judge was like, and I don't like the fact that you're using Signal, which is an app that's used in communication that has an auto delete function that people use for secrecy purposes. That is against everything that is appropriate in government records, and you are to stop using it, and you are to make yourself, available and transparent to the American people. Now, Crew wanted all those documents to come out during this congressional debate about government and about the budget and about funding. The judge was like, well, I'm not sure all of these documents are really necessary for the American people to see in time, like yesterday, but I do want them to come out quickly. So I don't want to wait on I don't want to wait for a full production like 3 months from now. You start rolling production, and just for people to tune in here, tuning in late, rolling production, which I've been involved with a lot in e-discovery and civil cases, means you don't wait to a date certain to do a data dump of everything that you have. Like, okay, back up the tractor trailer or the terabyte digital version of that. Here you go, boom, dump. It's a rolling production, meaning as you get documents together, and it better start soon, you start sending out half a terabyte, or whatever it takes to produce your documents, so that we get some of them now. We don't have to wait till the very, very end. So he ordered that as well. It's hard to believe that with over 100 cases, it's the first case where a federal judge has said, yeah, I can't figure out DOGE. It's way too opaque. But I can tell you one thing I have figured out is that it's exercising independent agency authority, and therefore is not covered by the executive privilege. He didn't mention executive privilege, that 4-letter word, by name, but that's the battle that's going to come up next. As we talked about on Saturday with Ben and me, the next big fight is going to be the Trump administration arguing, and I think unsuccessfully, that Musk is just an advisor and has no real power. And everything he's doing is he's advising the president, and there needs to be executive privilege that protects that. And he shouldn't be subject to FOIA, and he shouldn't be subject to depositions. And that's our position. I think that's a loser at the trial court level. I think that's a loser at the various circuit courts of appeal. And I do think, although I'll come back and tell you I was wrong, that at the Supreme Court level with Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett, it's going to be a loser. He may not even get 4 votes for that proposition. Just the way he's using DOGE as the wrecking ball, the destroyer of all worlds, indicates it's exercising substantial executive function and authority in the dark. That's exactly what we don't want. The reason for FOIA, the reason for FOIL, the reason for public records laws in states is because we like to operate. We're supposed to operate government in the sunshine being the best disinfectant. And that's how we've always approached government. We don't allow smoke-filled back rooms to make deals. I mean, they still go on, but we leave it to public interest groups and NGOs like Crew to bring these to the forefront of federal judges' doorsteps and have them make the decision that Judge Cooper just made. Karen, you ready to move on to birthright citizenship? Another big blockbuster in the last 24 hours? Okay. So, within days of the Trump administration back in January, early February, we had a series of decisions that were entered by federal judges in New England, in California, in San Francisco in particular, in Maryland, all concluding the same thing, which is Donald Trump's effort by executive order to rip the 14th Amendment to shreds and to rip out what I refer to as the beating heart of birthright citizenship from the Constitution is unconstitutional. Donald Trump issued an executive order that said in sum and substance that if the mother of a child born on American soil is either documented or documented but temporary, but the father's not a U.S. citizen, or is undocumented here illegally and the father's not a U.S. citizen, no birthright citizenship, despite what it says in the 14th Amendment, which is exactly the opposite, which is, I know they derisively call it anchor babies, but it is children born on U.S. soil are U.S. citizens and can one day grow up to be the president of the United States in a way that somebody like Ted Cruz from Canada can't be. And that has been our law since the 14th Amendment, as interpreted as late as 1898 in a case by the Supreme Court, and has been reinforced for the last 100 years. Except Donald Trump figured he'd take a shot at it, which is because it's a article of faith with the Heritage Foundation and the Federalists that they get rid of birthright citizenship. So that's the framing. When we come back, I'll have Karen weigh in about the order that just came out from the First Circuit about refusing to block a nationwide injunction, how it compares to the Ninth and the Fourth Circuit. And then we'll talk about what the United States Supreme Court has to say about all that. And so we'll talk about that when we come back from our first ad break. Number of ways to support Midas Touch. Hit the Midas Touch subscribe button. Come over to Legal AF. We've already crossed the 500,000 barrier. Hit the subscribe button there. That helps send the message to the algorithmic gods that you like the content there as well. We've got our sponsors who, of course, post-election, they know what we're all about. They know we're speaking truth to power to each other and to power, speaking truth to each other first. And hit the subscribe button for all of the things we talked about. Hit the like button for the podcast that you're on right now, both in the audio version on all podcast platforms and, of course, on YouTube. And leave comment. That helps. 5-star review. I know we start sounding like an Uber driver, but that's important too. And then we've got, when we come back from the ad break, I'll talk a little bit about the new Popok firm that's been formed and how and what's happening there. So you guys know about that as well. Let's take our first ad break. Look, let me tell you, if there's a surefire way to wake up feeling fresh after a night of drinking, it's with pre-alcohol. Z-Biotics Pre-Alcohol Probiotic Drink is the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. And here's how it works. When you drink, alcohol gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. So I first gave pre-alcohol a try when I was celebrating our relocation and unpacking the last of the 150 moving boxes. I drank it before my first scotch and soda. And you wouldn't believe how on top of my game I felt the very next morning. This March Madness, don't let anything sideline your celebrations. Grab pre-alcohol before you go out and be ready to cheer on your team all day and night long. Go to zbiotics.com/legalaf to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use Legal AF at checkout. ZBiotics is back with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money. No questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/legalaf and use the code legalaf at checkout for 15% off. Millions of Americans grind or clench their teeth at night, and most don't even know they're doing it. If you have jaw pain or headaches after a night's sleep, there's a high chance you grind or clench your teeth. Teeth grinding, also known as bruxism or TMJ, is generally caused by stress, and it can cause serious damage, such as eroding away your enamel and broken teeth, which leads to expensive dental bills. The solution to protecting your teeth is a mouth guard, but mouth guards from the dentist, they can cost you around $500 to $800. The good news is that there's Remy. Remy makes dental-grade, professional-quality mouthguards without the painful price tag. They're up to 80% cheaper than what you'd pay at the dentist and don't require you to visit a dental office. Remy's process is simple. They send you an at-home impression kit to create molds of your teeth. You send those back to Remy, and Remy's dental team will make your custom fit guards and send them right back to you. Remy's guards are so comfortable to wear that most customers forget they're even wearing them. Plus, with a 45-night satisfaction guarantee, you can try it risk-free, sleep better, and decide if it's the perfect fit. If not, Remy's got you covered. Look, stress can be my middle name sometimes, especially in the fast-paced world of podcasting and content creation. I'm on a news cycle timer, and at night, sometimes I have trouble turning off the old brain engine. And I have a lot of dental work that my dentist would love if I did a better job protecting, including my smile. And then I found the Remy mouthguard kit. And now my dentist is jealous. The in-home process was so convenient, easy, and affordable using their custom impression kit. It took me less than 10 minutes, and Remy ships it to you for no additional cost. And they keep your impression on file for future use. Remy is for anyone dealing with nighttime grinding, clenching, or jaw pain who wants an affordable solution to protect their smile and say goodnight to jaw pain and headaches. Head to shopremy.com/legalaf and use code LegalAF to save up to 50%. That's 50% off at shopremi.com/legalaf with code LegalAF. Give your teeth a break without breaking the bank with Remy. Thank you, Remy, for sponsoring this episode. Okay, welcome back. The last thing that's on my agenda, as people know, since November and in December, I formed a new law firm. It's called the Popok firm. It's dedicated to obtaining justice for people, primarily those that have been injured catastrophically in injury cases. It's a contingency fee case, meaning we don't get paid unless you do. I'm working with an amazing group of nationwide plaintiffs contingency lawyers. This is what they do for a living. They know the judges, they know the courts, and they know how to obtain justice for people. So come over to the Popok firm. It's at www.thepopokfirm.com. I made it easy, and our 800 number, 1-877-POPOK-AF. All right, let's go back to birthright citizenship. I guess I thought before the election he'd try it because it's in the playbook for Project 2025, but I don't think he should be. I don't think anybody's really surprised in the Trump administration that they're losing and losing badly. The First Circuit in Boston ruled in favor of Judge Sorokin's nationwide injunction. And just so I'll just turn it over to you now. This is not on the merits of the appeal, not yet anyway. This is about whether, while the appeal on the merits is going on, whether the injunction is going to be allowed to block the executive order so that every baby born from now through the appeals ending is an American citizen, or is the injunction going to be blocked because some appellate judge thinks ultimately Trump's going to win on this issue? So far, no judge thinks he's going to win on this issue. Karen, why don't you take it from there?
You know, I have to say, part of me wonders, is Trump's strategy to just say something so outrageous and so extreme so that when knowing he's never going to get the completely lawless, outrageous thing, so that if he gets anything even remotely like that, he declares victory and everyone declares victory. Meanwhile, the thing he ultimately gets is terrible too, because this falls into that category of, this is so outrageous. I can't believe they even will do this with a straight face. They'll even go with a straight face to suggest that somehow he can sign an executive order that overrides the Constitution that establishes birthright citizenship. So this is just one of those outrageous things that he's trying to do. And he has been, this is a big deal because this is, I think, his third or fourth loss on birthright citizenship. And, you know, all of these cases are going to go to the Supreme Court. But here, you know, essentially in this case, the judge says that the government basically doesn't make any argument to show that the executive order itself is constitutional, and doesn't contest that birthright, that essentially, if you're born on U.S. soil, that's been going on for over 100 years. So they basically declined Trump's request to grant or to lift, I should say, the nationwide injunction that is blocking this executive order that is trying to redefine birthright citizenship from going into effect. And so what Trump's executive order is trying to do is say, essentially, anyone who has two undocumented parents who's giving birth to someone in the U.S., then that if it doesn't matter that you were born on U.S. soil, that is not, you are not going to be a U.S. citizen. And so he basically, I think it was two different scenarios. One is that the mother is either undocumented or is here temporarily, and the father is undocumented. And that, though, in those two scenarios. But look, this violates the 14th Amendment, Section 1, and number 8 U.S. Code 1401, which provides that, quote, a person born in the U.S. and subject to the jurisdiction thereof shall be a citizen of the United States at birth. So it's essentially, it's a great order. And, you know, I love when you do these, when you explain the whole preliminary injunction thing. I think it's really important for people to understand. And I've learned so much from you, Popok, explaining how difficult it is to get a preliminary injunction, that you have to essentially prove 4 things, including that you are likely to win on the merits. Like, you have to show, I'm going to win this case. And so what a lower court has said, what lower courts have been saying over and over again, is I find that the plaintiffs, that you're going to win, that that's so clear. The law is so clear here that the Constitution and the statute passed by Congress, that if you're born on U.S. soil, you're going to be a citizen. That is so clear. And this executive order is so antithetical to those laws and against the Constitution and unconstitutional, that I believe you're going to win on the merits. And so therefore I'm going to issue an injunction saying this cannot go into effect. So they have to make a clear showing that they're likely to win their case. So that's what the judge here found. The appellate court found that the judge who issued this injunction was right, and they weren't going to lift that injunction. And all these cases are going to head to the Supreme Court, where your guess is as good as anybody about what's going to happen. So this is the First Circuit Court, which is the appellate court level, to uphold the district courts that have been issuing these injunctions.
Yeah, and it joins the Fourth Circuit out of a Maryland federal court decision. There's multiple nationwide injunctions here. They sort of overlap. So Donald Trump's just trying to find the right one to appeal from. The Ninth Circuit, over Judge Coffenor in San Francisco, ruled against Donald Trump. They all cite the same case. It's the leading dispositive case is an 1898 case involving an American-born child who grows up to be an adult, of course, whose parents are Chinese and still kind of beholden to the emperor of China at the time. But the kid was born in San Francisco. I mean, I don't know how to put this any more simply. And then he goes to visit China. You know, he wants to go back to see his parents' homeland, not his own. He was born in San Francisco. And when he comes back in, and like he's in his 20s, the border patrol at the time or whatever, immigrant, was like, no, you're not allowed back in. He goes, I'm a U.S. citizen. They said, no, your parents were born in China. And he's like, no, okay, well, I was born in San Francisco. And it went all the way up to the United States Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court said in 1898, based on the 14th Amendment, kid was born on U.S. soil. His parents aren't ambassadors or diplomats. They were just, working stiffs that happened to still be Chinese citizens or residents, but they gave birth. The mother gave birth in San Francisco. He's an American citizen. That's the way our birthright citizenship, derisively called anchor baby thing, works. So every court that's looked at it since, from, first of all, no president before Trump was a madman enough, was insane enough to try to test this. But Donald Trump, he's held hostage by those that supported him and paid for his presidency. And he's like, all right, I got to do the birthright citizenship thing now. All right, hand me the executive order. Where's my Sharpie? Okay. Is everybody happy now? And then he's got to trot out the Department of Justice on your and my taxpayer dime to go defend these ridiculous cases. In fact, the judge commented in the First Circuit case that we're talking about right now, Judge Barron, he said on page 10 of his order that the Trump administration didn't even try to make out a case at all. because they were relying not on the merits of the case. They tried to argue that the 18 states, including New Jersey, the case is known as New Jersey versus Trump, and the city of San Francisco, that joined together to sue in Massachusetts, that they don't have standing, which is the fundamental threshold thing that a judge needs to identify and establish for, or make sure that is present for parties to be in front of them, because we require judges to only exert their jurisdiction if there's a live case or controversy. And one of the ways we determine whether there's a live case and controversy is whether people have standing, or they're just sort of strangers to a matter. They haven't really suffered any injury, but they're interested, sort of like, we can't convert federal courts into the magic 8-ball. I'm just wondering, Judge, what do you think about this? It has to be a live case or controversy brought by people who have standing to be there. And the Trump administration tried to argue there's no standing by these 18 states. Although one of the plaintiffs, Karen, is a pregnant, undocumented woman. Sounds like she's got standing to argue that this case is, that this order is unconstitutional. The states made a good argument, what the constitutional scholars refer to as a pocketbook argument, which is they were going to lose federal funding if Donald Trump declassified these babies born on U.S. soil as non-U.S. citizens, and they would suffer because the states would have to take care of these children, but they wouldn't have access to federal funds to do it. And so that was a very good pocketbook argument, and the judge said, "Yeah, you got standing. What's your argument? You haven't even addressed the merits," because they didn't want to address the merits because they knew, the Trump administration knew they were going to lose on the merits. So now you've got a very good record up on appeal, although the Supreme Court can do whatever they want. Supreme Court has shown a complete willingness to disregard the record from below, which is a violation of everything I was ever taught about appellate law, judges, and the Supreme Court, and just go, okay, let's just get to what we want to decide on, regardless of what the record says. But assuming they go by the record, this case coming out of the first, along with the fourth, along with the ninth, with Judge Coffenor in the ninth, the Maryland case in the fourth, is a nice little package now for the United States Supreme Court. Now, Trump's going to have to make a decision. Which one is he going to try to take up to the U.S. Supreme Court? They're all terrible for him. All the decisions of the records are all terrible. Is he going to do the standing one? Is he going to do the substantive one? Which one's he going to do? Or is he going to wait to go through the appellate process in each of, the further appellate process on the substance? Because this was, again, only about the restraining orders and whether they stay or go during the pendency of the appeal. So my gut is because he's got a loser appellate argument, he's going to try again to the U.S. Supreme Court on an emergency writ. The problem is now he's playing into the hands of the Democrats who filed these cases and the moderates and free-thinking people, because they're in places where the Supreme Court justice sitting over those circuits are the moderate ones and the Democratic ones. And they can either decide on their own to no, without any reference to the full court, and that's the shadow docket, or they can send it over to the full court. Either way, there may be 4 votes to take up the writ. I just don't think with Roberts and Amy Coney Barrett, there's 5 votes to find that an executive order in this giant rock, paper, scissors thing, that an executive order beats the 14th Amendment, or that Donald Trump's reading of the 14th Amendment and reading out certain words he doesn't like is going to fly. What do you think, Karen?
Yeah, look, my hope is that the Supreme Court will ultimately not will deny any writ. In other words, they won't hear this case, that they will say that when this comes up, that when one of the cases substantively, not just the injunction, but rules, no, the 14th Amendment actually provides for birthright citizenship. I hope an appellate court does that. I hope that goes to the Supreme Court. And when Donald Trump tries to appeal that to get them to overturn it, I hope they just deny it and don't even hear it, because it is such clear law. It's not worth wasting the resources, these really finite resources of the United States Supreme Court. I mean, like we talked about this, I think last week, the Supreme Court only hears, I think 60, 70 cases out of the thousands that are appealed to the Supreme Court. And they take the cases very carefully, very gingerly, and really important issues go there. This is not one that's even a close call. This shouldn't even be a waste of their time. So hopefully they'll see it that way and send a clear message that says, look, we're going to uphold it and allow the lower court to stand, and we're not even going to hear it. It's not worth our time. Let's move on to something more more like where there's a real issue involved. But this is clear cut. This is a clear violation of the Constitution and the law that the Trump administration is trying to do, in my opinion.
I agree with you. And the peel away from the 4 that are necessary, if it's not killed in its at the starting line by one of the emergency Supreme Court justices that I've identified, and it goes to the full bench. Maybe there's not 4. The one I could see peeling away is Kavanaugh. I've seen him peel away before on these kind of issues. We'll see. Amy Coney Barrett, with her 8 children, including one adopted from Haiti, I just don't think she's going to find that an executive order from the sitting president is able to change 100 years of precedent, even Amy Coney Barrett. So I think ultimately I feel pretty good about the full bench eventually voting on this, because it should be an easy loss or easy win for those that have brought this case. But we'll continue to talk about that. When we come back from an ad break, we're going to talk about this strange case of one of the smallest agencies bringing a case in D.C., getting assigned to Judge Leon, and him issuing an initial stay about their destruction. And if you read, I don't know if you went through it all, Karen, if you read the TikTok of the timeline of what happened to this African Development Agency with DOGE and then U.S. Marshals kicking down the door, and they're lying their way, the DOGE lying their way in order to gain access, saying they were just there to modernize the servers and the architecture. And then when they were let in, they said, no, we're here to chloroform you and put you out of business and reduce you to the smallest amount of activity and funding as congressionally possible. This was an entity created by Congress as part of U.S. aid to and part of diplomacy to help dying Africans. Sounds like a pretty good thing. And Congress already allocated money for it. And you had Donald Trump, who's supposed to be the executive branch, executing on congressional law and faithfully upholding it, doing the opposite. And it went before Judge Leon. We had an administrative stay, but then we had the current ruling on the temporary restraining order that is a little bit of a head scratcher we'll have to talk about. And then Mahmoud Khalil, who, again, is an activist, a graduate student, living in graduate dorms and housing on Columbia University's campus, easy to find, with his 8-month U.S. citizen pregnant wife, who gets picked up by ICE and has his quote-unquote green card revoked, which has to be done through an administrative law judge and an immigration judge, but it's done by ICE on the street as they whisk the guy off within 12 hours to Louisiana to get him out from under New York court jurisdiction. And a federal judge is holding a hearing about it. And we're going to talk about all of that when we come back. First, a next word from our sponsors. The reason we like the sponsors is as you know, I don't want this to kind of fall on deaf ears or through a little bit of fatigue. We're an independent news network, media network with no outside investors, right? That's the good thing. Nobody tells us what to say. We're completely uncensored. I know there's some suggestion out there that somebody's telling me or Karen what to say or not to say, or we're not covering something because somebody's telling us not to. If we're not covering something, it's because we've made an independent judgment that it's either BS, magical thinking, or just not in curating our content is it's not something that's worth, the juice is not worth the squeeze. That's our decision. That's how we operate our quote unquote newsroom. Others can follow it. YouTube's a big universe. You want to follow somebody else that does something, that talks about something else in a way that we don't? That's our democracy. That's how it should be. But if you like what we're doing here, hit that subscribe button. Go over to Midas, to Legal AF. Hit the subscribe button there. Leave comments. Be active as you are. I mean, we have such a beautiful, engaged, active, enthusiastic audience and listener base. It's just, it's the envy, I think, of any other YouTube. I put our group against anybody. There's a reason Midas Touch is floated up to number 1. There's a reason Legal AF is regularly in the top 10 in what we do. There's a reason Legal AF, the YouTube channel, hit 500,000 in less than 6 months. And yeah, we're doing the curating and the commentating on this side of the camera, but you guys are doing the watching, listening, absorbing, and the time commitment and the enthusiasm and helping us spread by word of mouth organically, because we don't have a marketing department. We are the marketing department. We are the network. You're the network.
Oh, come on, we have Jordy.
That's true. Jordy's the ad guy. He's not the marketer. We're the marketer. Right?
I know. I'm kidding.
No, I like Jordy. So, of course. So, hit the subscribe button. Do all those things. Legal AF. Do all those things. So, our ads. Speaking of Jordy, our ads are cultivated and curated as well. These are sponsors that aren't just out to make a buck. Sure, they're for profit. Let's be frank. They're not for profit, but they want to talk to our audience, and they know what we're talking about. And we don't have meetings, just to burst anybody's theory. We don't have meetings with our advertisers where they go, could you tone down the attacks on the Trump administration? Could you not talk so much about the Supreme Court or something that Trump is doing on tariffs with Canada? Nobody tells us that. And if they told us that, we would click them off. Click. We have fired sponsors, as people know, very famously. So if you have disposable income, you think this is interesting, you think it's something that you'd like to try or could improve your life in some way, then that's why they're here. And then, so let's take our word from our sponsors.
Lumi is a whole body deodorant that you can use absolutely anywhere. It's a fantastic product that you can use anywhere you need a little extra help. It is really wonderful. It gives you more confidence. And I love the deodorant and have incorporated it into my daily routine. As I said, it's a whole body deodorant that's safe to use anywhere on your body, whether it's under your arms or other folds or belly buttons or cracks, etc., or your feet. So it was created by an OBGYN who saw firsthand how normal body odor was being misdiagnosed and mistreated. It's clinically proven to block odor all day and control odor for up to 72 hours. They have several product options, whether you prefer a solid stick deodorant, sweat control deodorant, spray deodorant. All their products are baking soda free and paraben free, pH balanced for safe use below the belt, and have a variety of wonderful scents. So the starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like a mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. As a special offer for listeners, new customers get 15% off all Lumi products with our exclusive code. And if you combine the 15% off with the already discounted starter pack, that equals over 40% off their starter pack. Use code LEGALAF for 15% off your first purchase at LumiDeodorant.com. That's code LEGALAF at LUMEDEODORANT.com. Please support our show. Tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Lumi.
Have you heard about senolytics yet? It's a class of ingredients discovered less than 10 years ago, and they're being called the biggest discovery of our time for promoting healthy aging and enhancing your physical prime. Look, if someone would have told me that there are science-backed ingredients that could help me feel 15 years younger in a matter of months, I wouldn't have believed it. Then I tried Qualia Senolytic. Look, as we age, everyone accumulates senescent cells in their body. Senescent cells cause symptoms of aging, such as aches and discomfort, slow workout recoveries, sluggish mental and physical energy associated with that middle-age feeling. Also known as zombie cells, they are old and worn out and not serving a useful function for our health anymore, but they are taking up space and nutrients from our healthy cells. The formula is non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, and the ingredients are meant to complement one another, factoring in the combined effect of all ingredients together. New research on aging and longevity, including a clinical study on Qualia Senolytic, shows that senolytic supplementation can play a huge role in enhancing how we age. Since I started taking senolytic, I feel much more productive and enthusiastic as I embrace life with a lot less aches and pains. Resist aging at the cellular level. Try Qualia Senolytic. Go to qualialife.com/legalaf for up to 50% off and use code legalaf at checkout for an additional 15% off. That's QUALIA life.com/legalaf for an extra 15% off your purchase. Thanks to Qualia for sponsoring today's episode. Okay, welcome back. African Development Foundation. jackbooted U.S. Marshals pounding down the door to take out the executive director and replace him with Peter Morocco, a Donald Trump henchman whose main job is to chloroform that agency. Look, all of these agency heads, from Linda McMahon at Education to the Secretary of State, to the Secretary of Transportation, to Peter Morocco, they've all been given one charge. Put your agency, department, and bureau out of existence. Chloroform it, take it out in the back and shoot it. That's their mission. I don't remember voting for that. Of course, I didn't vote for Trump. People didn't. Where was that on the platform? Where was that on the agenda? That's why there's so much voter remorse. That's why there's so much misgivings. So many MAGA voters are being hurt terribly by Trump's policies, whether it's veterans or others in poor and rural states. Who do you think's getting the brunt end of Donald Trump's irrational, immoral, depraved policies? It's red states. It's those voters. He's fired more veterans and things devoted to veterans benefits and affairs than any other president in history. We're 60 days into his administration. That is his legacy, among other things. And for those that I mean, he's gone so far. Just leave it on this note before we go back to the African Foundation. It's gotten so disgusting that even MAGA and right-wing legislators are finding that lines have been crossed. I mean, we just had a debate that was shut down in Congress today because one of the MAGA Congress people decided they were going to misgender one of the other Congress people who's transgender and identifies as a woman, and kept calling that person from Delaware Mr. 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 And the MAGA chairperson had enough and said, that's beyond the pale. We're not doing that here. We're the Congress of the United States. We're not a 7th grade lunchroom. And so one of the things that I want people to examine when we talk about cases, some of which go the way we want it to, some of which don't go the way we want it to, is think about the America that you want to wake up in 2 years or less at the midterms and beyond. And whether this administration, through its policies and procedures litigated through the courts, matches your ideal of what it means to be an American. And if it doesn't, and it shouldn't, then vote no in a binary way against anybody with an R next to their name come the midterms. Or as I'd like to say on a bumper sticker, I see all these other bumper stickers. 14th Amendment, Section 3, let's have a march. Great, I got another bumper sticker. Give me the House and the Senate at the midterms, and I'll give you an impeachment and a conviction and a removal. Let's put all our energy into that. That is going to get us where we want to go. So I was encouraged by this, back to the African development case, because I thought, wow, look at the timeline that's listed here, from how the lies made by DOGE to get their way in, the attempts to replace, the attempts to shrink this down to small enough size it could be drowned in a bathtub as an organization against the will of Congress. Here we go. Judge Leon, do the right thing. And he started to, and then something went a little bit awry. What did you make of his current ruling about denying the temporary restraining order, Karen?
Yeah, look, I think I just want to get back to what you were saying before about how we curate what we're going to talk about. There's so much that we could talk about. That is part of, I think, the beauty of Legal AF is we aren't just something that tells you everything. We take a lot of time to figure out what are of all the fire hose of Trump related stuff, and there is a fire hose, what are the ones that are really important that people need to know about? And this is one that, Popok, I give you a lot of credit for putting on our list of cases that we're going to talk about, because this is something that could have easily been missed and that isn't going to necessarily get a lot of play, yet it is extremely significant. And so I think the curating aspect of what is important is just as important as the analysis itself, and just really showing people, okay, because it's hard to pay attention to everything that's going on. It's hard to understand now, what is this? It's literally a fire hose of things that have been going on for the last, 50 days, 60 days since Trump has been president, of just complete lawlessness. And so this is just this very small agency that frankly I'd never heard of before, the African Development Board, that essentially provides grants and things and investing in small businesses in Africa. And this is an agency, an independent agency that was created by Congress in 1980 and is controlled by a board of members. And they are confirmed by the Senate. And there's about 50 people who work there. And a congressionally created agency is something that you don't have complete authority over the way they think that they do. And meanwhile, Donald Trump on February 19th did one of his crazy executive orders that actually names this as one of the agencies that they are getting rid of. And Judge Leone, who's a Bush appointee, by the way, a George W. Bush appointee, said that this is a violation of the Appointments Clause. This was an agency established by Congress. This board was appointed by Congress, and what you're doing is unconstitutional. So it's basically an unnecessary executive order, and it was an unlawful executive order that appointed a new head of this small agency that provides this aid to Africa, appointed new board members, but essentially the judge held that this was pretextual. You're just trying to close it down. And, DOGE came in and started threatening the board, so that you're going to be fired. They wouldn't let him in. And then they had to come with U.S. Marshals. And, they tried to do what they always do and then shut this down. They come in saying, this pretextual coming in saying, oh, we're just here to provide software expertise. Musk with his tech support T-shirt, nothing to see here. We're just providing tech support. We're not here to shut things down. But essentially the federal judge here said that, look, you're removing most of the grants, you're moving most of the staff of this federal agency, and you can't do it. This is a legally created entity by Congress, and you just can't do it without violating the law. So I thought this was a really important. I think this is just really important to show that the rule of the law matters, and the judges are starting to uphold it.
Yeah, I agree. Except, we got Leon today who said, I'm not going to grant a temporary restraining order because it looks like an executive director is trying to get his job back, and that's not irreparable harm. But, I always love when these judges are using magical thinking. But I expect the Trump administration to do the right thing. See, he already analyzed it, I think, in the wrong way. He analyzed it from an employee problem, as opposed to a destroyer of worlds without congressional mandate and violation of separation of powers problem, which is the way that the lawyers that brought this case framed it. And now I think if I'm the group that brought this case, I take that denial of the temporary restraining order, which now basically confers jurisdiction on the appellate court, and I take it up to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, which I think will be a little bit more favorable to their position. I could be wrong. What I liked about the lawsuit, when I read it and I did a hot take on it, is that it really does, the first way, show how surreptitious and underhanded the whole Musk DOGE operation is. The one that Cooper, the judge we talked about earlier, in finding that DOGE is a federal agency for public records purposes, also was concerned about. That they're the very thing that makes them so successful in implementing their policy of cutting the legs out from the administrative state and making our government less accountable to the American people, regardless of what they say about that. That's that gaslighting you talked about earlier. Is that speed and velocity, and so you've got to bring it to the public. And I thought the lawsuit that we're talking about now did that. It just didn't seem to resonate with the senior judge the way I thought it would. And now I think it's going to have to go up to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. I also kudos to my co-anchor, because you're one of the few people that actually uses gaslighting correctly. It's become such a term. Everyone's like, oh, I feel like I'm being gaslit. But you actually used it exactly right. Gaslighting is when something is going on and they're telling you that it's not going on and not to trust your lying eyes. From a famous movie from the 1940s called Gaslight, where the husband tried to convince the wife she was going cuckoo crazy by continuing to adjust the lights in the house that were on gas back in the day with little gas bulbs. And he kept making them lower and higher. And then she'd say, are the lights flickering? And he'd say, no, honey, I don't know what you're talking about. Let's bring the psychiatrist in. Because I think he wanted to commit her to get all of her wealth. That's gaslighting. I hear a lot of people use it because they don't know where it comes from and they don't know what it means. You got it exactly as I would expect.
I always learn something from you, always. And the fact that you know about the movie, I am not surprised. I think that's
I saw the movie. I was like, is that where that comes from? That's so great.
Because that's really that's what all these cases are showing us. And that's what the judges are trying to say is, look, you can say all you want. Oh, no, he's not the head of DOGE, but we know he is. And at the joint session of Congress, they announced it was, or when, what was the 25-year-old's, remember when she came out, the communications director came out and
Carolyn Levitt.
Yeah, that was another time when they go to court and they say, oh, they basically, the judge says, whatever. They said there was a temporary restraining order and you have to do something. And she's like, okay, we'll just rip up the memo, but we're still going to do the thing, right?
Yeah, on funding. Right.
Yeah, exactly. On USAID funding. But, it's just, the courts are the ones who are going to, it's not all heroes wear capes. Here it's going to be all the heroes wear robes, because that's really what is happening is that it's the courts and the judges who I think are going to save democracy ultimately and call it out for what it is.
We saw it on the criminal side. We covered it extensively. And all the federal judges trying to kind of rein in Donald Trump's criminal element during when he was candidate Trump and before, and under Jan 6th. I mean, just the sheer weight of the Jan 6th prosecutions, a couple of thousand going through one courthouse in the District of Columbia, touching the lives of every judge that's out there. These are the same judges now that, having went through and watched all the footage and know, if anybody knows what really happened, it's only one set of facts. It's the judges of the DC court and the DC circuit on these Jan 6 cases, and what Donald Trump really is responsible for, having formed their own opinions as well. And now these are the same judges on the civil side that are being asked to protect our democracy from Donald Trump burning it down as now the president of the United States, drunk with power. And
in these cases, the defendants, who inevitably is the Trump administration, in the various cases that we cover here at Legal AF, that what they're doing is they're saying, oh no, Elon Musk is not the head of DOGE. And then when at the joint session of Congress, the president says he is the head of DOGE and he stands up, the plaintiffs within an hour, I think, took that footage and filed it with the court and said, look, they're lying to you. Right. And it's just, go ahead.
No. I'm just laughing at your comment.
No, but that's what's happening, and people are paying attention. And so it's shows like this that is calling attention to what is actually happening, because that's the only way I think they're going to get called out for what they're doing.
Well, on that note, Judge Cooper, in his 37 pages, spent a considerable amount of time saying that my record in this case is effectively supplemented by what I'm reading in the media.
Yeah.
So for people that, this is again another place where we can call out and have it reverberate and vibrate with our audience and beyond. Sometimes we break news stories. Sometimes we are the news story. Sometimes we are reporting things that are little covered in a way that hopefully make the government more responsible, because it's not responsible now to the American people. And that's a good segue into our next segment, which is one of those we don't necessarily, when I'm trying to fit it into the curating with you, I'm like, we got to cover this. I mean, do I agree with my personal view, which I try to, other than my point of view, which I do in my analysis, do I agree with the sit-ins and the tent-ins on college campuses that made Jewish students feel uncomfortable during the attack by Hamas that killed 1,300 people in Israel on October 7th? No. But I'm a First Amendment guy, and I'm a due process guy in person, and I will defend till my death somebody's right to say it. I mean, when the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU, defended the right of American Nazis to march through Skokie, Illinois, which they picked on purpose because it had, at the time, one of the highest concentration of Holocaust survivors, and the Nazis wanted to walk through where Holocaust survivors lived. It was the American Civil Liberties Union that went to court to make sure they could do that. Founded by Jews, a lot of Jewish people. I'm a card-carrying member of the ACLU, but I also defend the right of people to have First Amendment expression. So Mahmoud Khalil, I may not agree with his point of view, but the fact that his green card, now if the, and let me also, so I can cover myself, if there are other real facts and not political polemics that are developed that demonstrate that he is not just a Hamas quote unquote sympathizer, but is actually, involved with the funding of Hamas or terrorist organizations and bank accounts and other things, then yes, I'll come back and say that I'm wrong. But if it's about him getting up on a soapbox or in a tent city to be a part of the marketplace of ideas that I may or may not agree with, and that's the reason his green card was revoked, and he was sent off to Jersey and then Louisiana to get him out from under a federal judge in New York, eventually Judge Furman. And again, an only in New York moment, you've got an Orthodox practicing Jewish judge who famously shuts his court down for Shabbat and for Jewish holidays, who's adjudicating the issue of Mahmoud Khalil, this graduate student on a green card, married to an American citizen, and him being having his ticket to the United States, his green card, revoked by ICE. When ICE, the reporting is, Karen, when ICE burst through the door of his Columbia University housing, not like he's hiding in plain sight, and said, you're out, we're deporting you, and we're arresting you, and we're revoking your student visa. He said, I don't have a student visa. I have a green card. So they very quickly switched gears and said, we're revoking your green card. And then Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, I think, sent out a social media post at the same time that said, we're revoking green cards of people that we suspect fill in the blank. Except that's not the way that works. You have to go through a due process, including an immigration judge, to determine whether the person should be in America or not. So as I predicted in my hot take a couple of days ago on the Legal AF channel, they whisked him off to Louisiana to put him in a red state, to bring him before a red state federal judge, to put him before the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, and not have to deal with New York. So why don't you talk about what Judge Furman has done and ordered as of right now in a hearing? I think it was actually today. And what do you think is going to happen into the future?
I mean, look, this is something that I had to do a little research into when this started happening, because I've never practiced immigration law. And I was wondering, what does it mean if you have a green card and you're a lawful permanent resident here in the United States, but not a citizen? Can a president just revoke your green card? Can they just say you are no longer allowed to be here, your status here? And it seems pretty clear you can't just do that, that there has to be, because he's a lawful permanent resident, he has a right to due process, and he has a right to a removal hearing that has all the procedural protections available to anyone who would be charged with a crime, because that's essentially the standard to revoke his status, his permanent status. And none of that has happened yet. And certainly, I'm not sure they're going to have anything that is going to show that. But, they're just trying to come in and revoke this from this activist at Columbia University, who very carefully did not actually participate in these encampments. He didn't participate in any of those things. He was just exercising his First Amendment rights to talk about the plight of Palestinian people with Israel. And he did that on purpose and intentionally, because he was a graduate student at Columbia and he didn't want to risk that status. So he tried very hard, my understanding, to follow what the rules are and to exercise his First Amendment rights. And that's really what he did. And Trump, however, just decided to say, look, no, we're going to arrest you and we're going to deport you and we're going to revoke your citizenship, or sorry, not your citizenship, your permanent resident status. But unfortunately, I think the procedures that they're using to deport a lawful permanent resident is not going to pass muster, because he has substantive constitutional rights in the deportation context, including the Due Process Clause and the First Amendment. And it's pretty clear that it's murkier than Trump thinks, as usual, right? Trump just thinks he's all powerful, that the US v. Trump case has essentially anointed him king. He can do whatever he wants, but they can't just simply revoke his status as a lawful permanent resident and render him subject to deportation without some kind of he had to have done something wrong, and he has a right to be told what he did wrong, to be accused, and to go through, it has to be he had to have done something to make him, quote, deportable under immigration laws. And that's pretty clearly spelled out and codified. It's in 8 United States Code 1227A. He's entitled to a hearing, and there's going to be a removal hearing. But I think his due process rights are going to ultimately, they're going to be held that he didn't do anything that makes him deportable given his permanent status.
And again, if he did, then show. I'm a lawyer. Karen's a lawyer. We like evidence. We're funny that way. The Trump administration is allergic to evidence. If you got the goods, bring him into court to a federal judge and show how he is beyond a Hamas, quote unquote, sympathizer who's standing on a soapbox and arguing, and show me where he is a terrorist. And if he's a terrorist or he's laundering money or those kind of things, all right, that changes the picture for me. I am a little concerned, though, Karen, that Friedman, in ordering that he remain in Louisiana, and have access to his lawyers to allow them to prepare his defense, he gave them it was like a very miserly order. He's like, 1 day and 1 phone call a day, 1 visit and 1 phone call. I'm like, I don't know what came. See, that's the problem. I don't know exactly what came out in that courtroom to have Friedman be so miserly in his giving access to this person in federal detention in Louisiana, and why he wasn't more upset. And again, I got to read the transcript to figure out whether he was more upset. We haven't gotten our hands on that yet, about having the Trump administration try to get him out from under New York jurisdiction. That was the argument in court today. Judge, you don't even have jurisdiction because they manufactured new jurisdiction, or attempted to. They said it's either New Jersey, because I'm not sure the New Jersey court is that much better, although it does go up to a different court of appeal. That's a little thing I'll talk about. New Jersey reports to a different, the Third Circuit Court of Appeals, even though it's just across the Hudson from New York. New York's the Second Circuit. They might think they got a better shot at the Third Circuit. He was only in Jersey for like a minute, and then they whisked him off in one of these planes to Louisiana in the middle of the night, where that's what they want. They want the Fifth Circuit and a Louisiana federal judge to handle the case. So there's a whole debate over that. I predicted it when I heard he ended up in Louisiana, which, shout out to the Columbia student newspaper. They did a good job on tracking him down through the system and finding out that he ended up in Louisiana. And that's not for a good, wholesome reason. Like, he's so dangerous, we had to put him in, penitentiary. And no, they moved him out of New York because they didn't want to deal with a New York liberal judge and the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. That's disgusting. That's not the world I want to wake up in. So we're going to have to follow that case closely because of the principles that it triggers and identifies and stands for. And it's important to me, and it should be to our audience, about the type of America that we live in. And you're right about the green card. The green card, yes, it's a privilege and it can be revoked, but it's also a property right that's been granted to somebody upon which they based their life. And it can't just be taken away with somebody from ICE or a Secretary of State who's acting as judge, jury, and executioner. There's a due process. We don't have star chambers. We're not supposed to. We don't have, we use Guantanamo Bay for a different reason, but we're not supposed to have in America, people cut off from access to their counsel. That is the way the case got into court. It was a writ of habeas corpus to bring the body, literally, bring the person, and have the government cough them up and bring them into court because they're being held somewhere against their will. And the question of incarceration and detention and liberty becomes the issue for the federal judge. So it's an interesting case that I think we're going to have to continue to follow, right, Karen?
Absolutely. I mean, look, he's married to a U.S. citizen. I think his wife is pregnant. He's
8 months. Yeah,
8 months pregnant. I mean, these are real people with real lives. And it's just, the Donald Trump and his administration, they're just, running roughshod over people's rights. It's just unbelievable.
Yeah. And just to bring our podcast full circle, she's about to give birth to an anchor baby.
Well,
under the 14th Amendment is a U.S. citizen.
Well, she's a U.S. citizen, so I think.
Well, that's true. So under that version of his thing, those executive orders don't apply. But correct. I was trying to make it funny. But you're right.
I know. I'm just.
That's all right.
I wake up every morning and I look at the paper like everybody else, and I've been recently looking. I don't have a lot of money in the stock market, but I have a little. And I'm just waiting for him to make America great again. I mean, it's just everything is going to shit. I
thought you said I had a lot of money in the stock market, but now I have a little.
No, a long time ago, I put a little money in, and it grew and grew and grew, and I never touched it. And the way I would I would be like, oh, I use this all the time. I'm going to now put, I'm going to buy 5 shares.
I buy products. I do that.
Yeah, like that's the extent of my how I buy stocks. And
where can I buy Nespresso stock? Right.
Yeah, exactly. Anything that you use all the time, I think, okay, I'm gonna whatever. So, and it grew and it grew, and it was not nothing. I mean, for me, it's money, and it is just tanked. I can't believe it. I'm like, and the same thing with whether it's groceries, whether it's, even ordering online. We went to a restaurant the other night in Chinatown, which is usually very affordable. Things were like double, triple the price. I couldn't believe what he's doing to this economy.
Egg prices are up 56% in a year. I thought Donald Trump was going to fix that on day. He had so much things he was going to fix on day one. I think it was a typo. He meant he was going to kill the economy and our U.S. democracy on day one, because that's all we're watching. But the way we fight, what do we do? Yeah, well, we're doing it. You're here. You're on the Midas Touch Network. Hit the subscribe button. Legal AF. Hit the subscribe button. Watch our hot takes. Do the comments. And gear up, everybody. Let's effing go, as Jordy likes to say, because we got to get ready and giddy up for the midterms. Give me back Congress. And it will go a long way to stopping Donald Trump in his tracks, make him the shortest of lame duck presidents, quicker than you can say the midterms. We got to get there. There's no choice. I like protesting like the next person. I like hanging out with people that are like-minded, but we got to vote. As the great Barack Obama says, don't boo, vote. And that's what we got to do. You got to organize.
I love all the resistance. I love that Greenland is pushing back and basically saying F off. I love that Canada is pushing back saying F off. I hope all other countries, I hope everybody stands strong. Even Ukraine, right? Things are starting to turn there for them. Like, I am so happy that there is resistance all over the world and in this country. And don't succumb to this. We have to fight back in every way that we can. We all have to stay together, and we all have to fight back, because this is just complete autocracy, authoritarianism, lawlessness, and it's not right. Europe joining together to stop an out-of-control totalitarian dictator who wants to destroy sovereignty of Europe. Where have I heard that before? I know, right? You know what else? You know what else I loved? I loved that the Hamilton production. Yeah. They were scheduled to perform one of the great shows of all time, one of the greatest soundtracks of all time. I'm such a huge Hamilton fan. Was scheduled to be at the Kennedy Center, and because of what Donald Trump has done, taken over the board of directors of the Kennedy Center, and is going to turn it into a WWE. Instead of having real things there, it's going to be one of these MAGA showcase things. They pulled out. Because it would be a farce to be at the Kennedy Center about what the founding fathers and the Constitution was like and perform there. And that's great resistance, and I think everybody has to do their part, and it'll happen. Oh, you don't like Lee Greenwood being the curator of programming for the Kennedy Center? This is what it is. It's Susie Wiles and her mother. It's the deputy chief of staff. It's everybody's wife for every donor. This is now on it's Maria Bartiromo and Laura Ingraham from Fox News, who covered Trump, who have now been bribed by being on the Kennedy Center. And the arts are fighting back. Good. As their art funding is being everybody has to fight back in their own way, even if it seems small. Anything you can do everybody has to do it. That's the resistance. And I'm so proud to be part of the Midas Touch and the Midas Touch Network and this resistance that we do here. And I am so just thrilled and honored to spend every Wednesday with you, Popok, doing Legal AF so that we can do our part in this.
Great way to sign off. You've reached the end of another great episode. Hopefully you find it that way, of Legal AF on the Midas Touch Network with Karen Friedman, Agnifilo, and Michael Popok. Get us here. Get us on podcast audio platforms. Get us on Saturday, where I do the show with Ben Mysalis. So until our next time together, this is Michael Popok, Karen Friedman, Agnifilo. Shout out to the Midas Mighty and the Legal AFers.